Hello.
Hi. What's up, Madison?
Oh, it's just the first podcast ever. Did you like that? Or was that a first not you like? Did you just like it?
I didn't like it. No.
Oh, we just got a 1 thumbs up. I'm super stoked. Oh, it's from Arabella. Hi,
What's up, Arabella?
Arabella. Oh, gosh. Way to start off with on a high note. Hopefully we'll just coast here.
I'm so used to seeing like Arabella in group classes. Like I'm looking around the screen for her and I'm like, wait, where is Arabella? But I guess we can't see people who are liking.
I feel like I see Arabella, I see you like 4 times a week. I see you more during COVID than I've seen you in person. Anyways.
That is the beautiful part of COVID is we get to see people so much more because they need hobbies in their life at a time like this. So anyway.
Very true. All right. So do you want to kick us off with telling us what our first podcast is about?
Yeah. So today we thought it would be a great idea to open up with what exactly teacher training is, what Modern Coach is all about, where it's come from, and why it's important, how we view it to be something that is critical for coaches who are looking to become the best that they can be. And there's so many fun memories, stories, and experiences behind what we're bringing to coaches today. So it would just be a great thing to start to dive into some of those concepts behind all of this. And so, Madison, I wanted to know if you had any place you wanted to begin because there's so much behind this.
Yeah, I think a really important aspect of Modern Coach is understanding kind of how we came together, and particularly my understanding of teacher training, particularly in the realm of music, and teaching music actually came from me becoming a part of the Musicians Playground team. When I first went through my own like PD meetings with you and the things that I learned along the way that actually inspired me to kind of take that and run with it and see how we could expand upon that. So part of this conversation is actually talking about your origin story from your transition from a teacher, you teaching at your private studio, and eventually hiring your first helpers or other teachers, and how you saw there was a need for either guidance or for you to step in and to bring all of the coaches who are under the Musicians Playground banner into kind of a unified representation of the brand itself and the type of experience that you wanted the clients to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I started out back in 2011 or 12 with picking up just some private clients, and I was beginning by traveling to their houses. So it's really incredible to see how far we've come in the period of time that has elapsed since then. But there was a point in like 2014 where I started to really get serious about Musicians Playground, about growing it, making it my only project. Like I had kind of a bunch of plan B's and C's at that time, and there was a lot going on, and I wasn't quite sure if it was exactly what I wanted to do, but there was a moment there that just felt like this is what I want to do, this is what I want to commit to. And so the next logical step after creating a home studio and having success there is I need to hire someone, because you can't possibly teach all these people. Like there's a limit, right? You can't, fit more than a certain amount of people in your day at some point and still be a sane human being.
Yeah. So, additionally, I think part of the conversation is that the more clients that you take on, the more responsibility, the more the responsibility on the back end of the business starts to grow as well. And not only the workload itself, but the stress and anxiety of client happiness and making sure that they're taken care of outside of just like the lesson experience.
I'm sorry, I'm getting like light. That's like,
it's really cool. It's like holoscopic lighting.
Oh my God. Yeah. So that is a conversation because your energy can dwindle to a point where you're no longer providing your best service to the people that you do serve. So it's definitely a conversation and probably something we're going to have another podcast about, I would imagine. But yeah, no, that was a very real thing. And how do you scale a business, right? And so that's one part of it. And I think a lot of studio owners, a lot of teachers rather, will stop short at that. They don't really think one step further, which is, what is the brand of this business? What do I even stand for as a teacher, as a human? And how do I want to touch the people's lives that I'm working with? And use that as the lens for making sure that all the other people that work alongside them also share that lens, right? And that's what teacher training is essentially helping us to streamline the level of quality and the philosophical standpoint that our teachers come from. And so back in 2014, sorry, a long-winded answer here, but I was looking at hiring Matt, which was like, he's been like my ride or die, as you know, for like 5 years now. I had to just say goodbye to him to let him move on to his next chapter in Hawaii. Super happy for him. But it was so helpful, by the way, to have Matt for a steady 5 years because he was my guinea pig with all of the teacher training stuff. Poor fellow. And and I just remember at that time, this is going to sound terrible to say, but I'm going to be honest. I just thought, okay, so I'm successful at teaching. I have a great studio. The answer to this equation is just making another me. So how do I make another me? And, at first it felt like it was more of a personality thing. So I would try to maybe look at Matt and change his personality or go to these places, which I know now are completely irrelevant sometimes to the equation. But, you have to go there. You have to explore so many different concepts and get to the heart of what's really the most important themes for you to feel like your philosophy is being upheld across the board with your teachers. So Matt, he was very much a huge part of this creation because I look at every single teacher you and I have served across the years, across even the years where it was before you came into the picture. And every single one of our teachers have contributed to the teacher training we offer today because they demonstrated something or they experienced something or we had to problem solve for something. And then over time, patterns emerged where we started to say, hey, this has happened with a lot of our teachers, a lot of our coaches. This probably is happening to a lot of coaches in a lot of places. How do we make this a systemized concept and how do we teach that in a way that, is exciting and engaging? So So I think that it's funny thinking back to when Matt was in the picture. I wish I could show a picture of the actual questionnaire, but I think I have to print out somewhere in the studio in storage, locked away for good. But there was teacher training itself started with me asking Matt to do a lot of observations and answer these very open-ended questionnaires. What are you noticing? Are you awake? This is terrible, but there were questions that were probably not very helpful. And what's really cool about that though, is it started so general that from that, again, things start to emerge and you lean further into those patterns. And then the questionnaire, which is super open-ended, evolved into a grid, which was your time when you came into the team and you went through your training. Remember the grid?
Yeah, the grid. So many observations, and we used that grid for a while. So for people who don't know what the grid was there was 4 different categories in which a lot of different things could fall under this umbrella. One was content. The other one was, you're going to have to help me out here, engagement or flow. And then there was 2 others with a miscellaneous box on the bottom. And I was like, there's a lot of miscellaneous here. So still pretty open-ended as far as the boxes. But I think what the grid really allowed for us to see when we had new teachers fill them out during their observations was to test their level of awareness.
Yeah.
And when I say level of awareness, the biggest differentiation I want to talk about with teacher training is that our teacher training has nothing to do with the knowledge they gain about their instrument. Mm-hmm. The teacher training is about how that musician or new coach or experienced coach takes the knowledge that they know and communicates it in the most efficient and engaging way possible to enhance the quality of the client's experience. And so when we talk about, you know, these grids and the sense of self-awareness, we're really gauging whether or not the coach is looking beyond the content and looking at the delivery process, whether it's from minute 1 to minute 60 in a lesson. It's not about what, but it's about the how, and it's about the why, and it's about everything beyond just the information itself. Mm-hmm. And for me, being a person who comes from a performance background and a performance education, my own personal experience with coaching did not come from a formal training, because in the education system through my undergraduate and my master's degree, I was trained to be a performer. So it was very much a self-awareness about what I was delivering, but that was to a mass audience. I wasn't being trained on how to teach someone how to do what I do. And so we see so many, you know, musicians and performers come through our door who've never had any experience or any type of training on how to communicate the things that they know to a client that helps the client progress along their journey and enjoy the process. Mm-hmm. And so when we first started, so back to like my own like origin with you, I still had things to learn as far as, you know, my way of communicating all of this vast knowledge that I carried, and making sure that I was being self-aware of how I was presenting myself and how the client was receiving what I was presenting to them, so I could make adjustments and make sure that we were walking down the road together in the best way possible.
Yeah. And, you know, it was so fun to see, Madison, when you entered the picture, you know, and back to also kind of where the conversation that I was having with you before left off, which is you entered when the grid was a thing, right? There was this very obscure document that we were having teachers, including yourself, fill out. And like you said, to track their awareness of how many different dynamics are at play in the teaching experience. But what's been so fun is, you know, that's now what teacher training has evolved to be with you in the picture, and where you and I as partners have been able to take it is now a formalized set of concepts with video trainings, with simulations, with a very set agenda of how to learn the foundational aspects and then evolve into various levels of coaches. So, it's turned into so much more than just a ton of observations. And I think back to a lot of really great moments too for you in your own development. And if you don't mind, can I share one of those stories?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So essentially, one of my favorites was the very beginning when you did a simulation, I think, with me. You were teaching.
Yeah.
And so I don't even know the words that you were saying, because it was all like anatomical references of the voice. And I was trying to sing like some Disney song, you know. I was like, sure, yeah, my vocal cords are doing something on top of something I can't pronounce. And, you know, and so there was like such a vast knowledge base that you were bringing to the table, and it made so much sense to you because of your own professional experience and career. And yet behind that, there was just a small disconnect in how translating that to something that was meaningful for me as a total beginner, right? And so together we explored, how do you bridge that gap? And that was just one instance of discoveries between the two of us of what's important in lessons with beginners, for example, versus more advanced students. So, but that was a really favorite moment because it was totally in the beginning, and we love that anatomical talk.
Yeah, it definitely comes down to I think personalities, and me speaking for myself, I am a person who loves the details and the mechanics of things. And this is going to bring me back to like we'll get into inspirations for what we bring to the table for teacher training. But it's one of the reasons why I have such a passion for classical singing and the style of it, because it is literally the acrobatics of singing. It is like the gymnasts, the Olympics of gymnasts of vocal training, truly. And it's so multifaceted, and it's all about the details. And on the flip side of that is also talking about why I have such a passion for the sport of Olympic weightlifting as well, because there's so many similarities about the all of these multifaceted components that come together to create, whether it's a particular movement, or for singing, it's for making a particular sound or singing a particular aria. And for a personality like mine, I love that. But understanding that maybe the client in front of me does not view or perceive the world in that same micro detailed way is such an important thing to know in order for you to have the best communication possible with them, and to make sure that they're actually walking away with the stuff that's just relevant for, as you mentioned, their skill level and what their own goals are. So I think it's a great transition for us to actually talk a little bit about like kind of where we both pull a lot of our inspiration for the way we like to communicate, or the way we like to train, particularly our teachers at Musicians Playground, how to deliver an engaging lesson.
Yeah. So essentially now, we have a very set way of training people. And it's evolved, as I mentioned, into like the concrete concepts that you and I have co-developed. And there's a lot of videos, a lot of simulations, a lot of worksheets, and a lot of assessing through actual experiential learning, right? Additionally, we do 2-hour teacher trainings every single week, which I want to call mastermind sessions, but over that. We got to come up with a sexier name than team meeting. But no, these team meetings are actually super fantastic. And I think you and I also continue to collect more and more ideas through sheer experience with our team and the trainees that we're working with, seeing them grow, seeing where they get hung up in the process, seeing the experiences that they have real time with clients in the studio. We are constantly coming up with new ideas of these overarching themes of what coaches struggle with, what they're challenged by, and then how we can best serve them. So I think that's kind of an overarching idea of like what teacher training is today and what it's all about, how it works, what like the schedule is. But I know you had more parts to your question. What else?
Yeah. So, as you know, we've had like certain experiences in our like, whether it's through music or through other facets of life that really informed us about that were really transformative experiences that shifted our perception of how we can engage better and how we can communicate better for our clients.
Yeah, sorry. Okay.
That's okay. No, it's good. We're landing the ship now into a grounded place.
That's a really hard thing to do with you and I. Like, I think ships go in so many different
It was so funny. Because someone who knows both of us was talking, they're like, you two are so philosophical. difficult and can like talk in the clouds for like hours on end. I'm like, that is the reason why we work well together, because we can understand. And also I think we just enjoy that process of just like being like, let's just talk about life on a higher level forever and never talk pragmatically.
Never land the ship. Oh yeah. Okay. So really quickly, I need to give a lot of credit to my pedagogy classes, my music and education classes at New England Conservatory's continuing education department. What's so cool, and what I can't express more to people who are in a situation where maybe you've already paid for an undergraduate degree, or maybe you are at a point in your life where it just doesn't make sense to fully go back to school, for example. There are ways of getting into fantastic programs with very low entries to barrier, and doing so can yield so much amazing value and information for you to pursue any sort of career that might be outside of your original discipline. So for me, I did business school, and while I had a lot of practical experience teaching from the age of 15 or so, I had this kind of desire to explore formal educational classes, pedagogy classes in the conservatory or somewhere, anywhere really that would take me. And I landed upon this continuing education program at New England Conservatory. And what's so cool, it's so small that they actually put you in real classes with graduate students. So you're working with some of the best musicians and some of the best educational thinkers in the world, really. I mean, it's a world-class program. And I'm a continuing education student. How cool is that? Like, I didn't have to be on the same level as all of these students musically, or, pay an arm and a leg to get into this program. So there's two professors, there's three really, that are extremely influential in different ways. One of them, though, that I want to share a story of, his name is Warren Senders. So Warren Senders is just a fabulous human being. Very alternative in his approach to collegiate teaching, to academic teaching on the collegiate level. And I remember going into the first class, it was called Cross-Cultural Alternatives for Teaching Music, which just is a big-winded way to say, like, how do you make music a universal language? How do you teach music when you're dealing with barriers like language or different, cultures? So the first class, this completely blew my mind. I walked in with like my notebook, my pen, ready to like start writing, ready for like a 2-hour seminar discussion, ready to know like everything Warren had to say about the subject and what I needed to memorize and what I needed to embody in my own teaching. And he just started pointing to like different parts of the room, and there were in different parts of the room various pieces like tools. And then he, without words, demonstrated how to build something at each station. And then, here we are, a group of graduate students, in my case, continuing education student as well. And we're building instruments. And then before you know it, we're without words coming together and playing as an ensemble on these instruments that we made by hand. And then we're writing a composition together. And within the 2-hour span, we had made so much music. We had connected so deeply, and there were no words throughout the entire 2-hour experience. So that was one huge shift for me. It made me realize how few words we really need to convey the heart of music and what it means to be a musician, what it means to play, right? And that a music lesson it can be so much more than a scale, and how the technicality of the theory behind a scale, or some of these things that us as advanced players find more important. Probably the beginner or someone who's just looking to have an experience that can totally transform the way that they relate to music and make it a part of fabric of their life. So anyway, huge shift. We now call that in our training wordless teaching, and we teach our teachers how to be more concise, how to use cueing in powerful ways, how to drop so many unnecessary words and make more music. But that was a huge shift for me, for sure. I lost a lot of words after that experience. So, all right, I want to hear from you. What was your story that was something that was transformational for you and creating some teacher training stuff.
Yeah, first off, I always love hearing the story about Warren Senders. I know it's even in my own coaching experience, wordless teaching has been such a transformative tool that completely shifts not only the way that you run a lesson, but just the way you communicate in general, because it transcends just like, communicating information or trying to teach someone something, but also understanding all of the tools that you have as a human being to communicate with another person, whether that's like with friends, with your family, in your relationship. And I think ultimately what it does do is provide a much more colorful experience for everyone, because we're tapping into all of these different sensory inputs. Sensory transceivers. And yeah, it's always really a beautiful thing to get reminded of wordless teaching. But anyways, on my end, I grew up in a very athletic family, grew up doing all the sports, eventually landed into basketball and played very competitively all the way up until college. And I think at the time we were ranked, I think number 3 to number 1 in the nation for our basketball team. And so with that being said, my introduction to very structured or rigid or methodical training started at a very young age. And when I talk about methodical training, the thing I want to get at is how you break down something that is complex into isolated parts, and work those things out first before compounding them back together. And so I always had a big awareness of seeing all of the parts at once and understanding that in order to fix the whole, most of the time you have to go and address individual parts first. Mm-hmm. And that talks a lot to programming, and how you problem solve when you are teaching someone a new skill or trying to refine something with someone. And so through college, I got into CrossFit. And both of us can talk about our experience with CrossFit. Right now, it's a little icky saying that, like, I have my L1, amidst right now everything going on with CrossFit HQ. But anyways, I got super heavy into CrossFit. And for those of you who are not familiar with CrossFit, the foundation of if you want to call it sport, or the class itself, the exercise, is built on a 60-minute class. And the way that the class is broken up is first a warm-up, then it's an isolated skill. Sometimes it's a strength component. Other than that, it might be a gymnastics movement, or whatever. It's just generally something that's isolated. And then the class after that is an integrative exercise. And they have these things called WODs, which is an acronym for workout of the day. And it's pulling from these different fundamental movements and putting them together to create a workout that is supposed to build your aerobic and anaerobic strength and endurance. And then you finish off with something. It's usually like, okay, go ahead and stretch or whatever. But the two components of CrossFit that really informed my way of viewing something like a 60-minute lesson or session experience was the flow of a warm-up, an isolated component, and then integrating that isolated component into a broader workout. And then the second aspect of that was the community or the collaboration aspect, which I think is something that is super important for us to talk about, particularly in regards to Musicians Playground and the community that we have built, not only through private lessons, but through group classes. And the camaraderie that one builds when they have trust, not only with the coach themselves, but with the people that they're around and going through the same experience with them. ultimately strengthens their trust in the process, but their enjoyment in the process as well. And so I feel like so many people are so curious as to why CrossFit has such a strong a community, to the point where they almost call it a cult. It's because of the community aspect, the camaraderie aspect, and it is the one thing that gets people through the most grueling or difficult times, or the times that they're being pushed to improve their skill or their endurance. So through that, and so being a CrossFitter myself, and then getting my own level 1 through CrossFit, really gave me a clarity in the systemized process of providing a lesson experience and how to divide up that programming in something that's very digestible. And then I moved into, and where I currently am at right now is, I've always had a passion since I first came across in CrossFit for Olympic weightlifting. And currently, I am a part of a club here in Boston, and the person or two people who create the programming themselves have Olympic experience. And so they come from a place of being a hardcore trainer, if you want to call it that, and really getting to the top of their sport. But with all of this experience, me being now the client and me working on my own skill, I get to be on the other side, and be the receiver of someone's programming, of someone's coaching, of someone's cueing, how they handle difficult situations when I'm not showing those micro progressions or the progress that I'm looking to see, and trusting the process. And that sense, or that dual perspective of coach and client, or coach and teacher, student, really helps me understand and empathize what a client might be going through when they are more so at the beginner level of learning a craft or a skill, not only from a physical standpoint of building something into muscle memory and being able to do it, but also the psychological process. And for me, when I come across something where I have a coach in front of me and I don't respond well to it, it becomes this mental note, or this moment of awareness, and like, have I done that in my own teaching with music or in athletics? And I wasn't aware. Was it because of I just didn't take the time to become aware, or was I purposely blocking that because of my own insecurities or ego?
Okay, wait.
Process.
I need to ask a question.
Yeah.
So short-winded answer to this, because we don't want to run out of time here. But what would you say are like your top most recent pet peeves that you see in like coaches, that you're like that kind of like flag has been raised in your head? Like, wait, do I do that? Or like, it's been kind of a self-reflection opportunity. So what are some things that you've seen that you can remember recently or in time that have come up?
Now, is this me observing, or me being the client?
You being the actual client, like maybe in your lifting classes, like whatever, like it could be coaching with any disciplines. What are some of those moments, like an example that we can provide our audience with, like when that flag raised for you, like, whoa, wait, this didn't feel good as a client, or, you know, and then what practice that led to that?
Yeah. So, one of those is that is a current conversation with my own club, is general programming versus specific programming for people's specific deficiencies and strengths. And we were put in into a situation where you are being provided programming or asked to be doing something that's supposed to be appeasing the masses, that we're all supposed to do regardless of whether or not we can do it, or do it efficiently, or do it well. It starts to create problems. And if it's brought up and there's no desire to provide leveling. And when we talk about leveling, meaning providing different options depending on a person's skill level. So they can work on consistency rather than them just struggling to survive to do it, and possibly risking injury as well, which is a big thing. That is the first one. And then the number two to your answer is, I've taken on many CrossFit classes and have come across many coaches. When a coach prescribes to work on a specific skill or movement and gives the original instructions and does demonstrations, all that, but then checks out and just lets the clients go and do it and try it out without any sense of intervening if they see something. And I feel like that type of behavior comes from two different places. It can either come from a place of inexperience, and that they're just not necessarily tuned in, and want to necessarily excel at their job quite yet, or they're just too self-aware. Or the number two thing is that they just don't care enough.
Well, I would also add to it too. Sorry to interrupt. I would add that, total like lukewarmth, like throughout the whole process. I would totally agree with those two things. There's some intervention. It could be a coach who values, people's self-exploration very highly. But I think it has to be in check. It has to be in balance, right? Your point. And so there is some value to also giving people space in the coaching experience to explore and like be and figure it out on their own. But to that point where they're like negligent, that's not helpful.
Yeah. And I think part of that comes from a place of comfort and getting into a routine of things. And you can also, I understand if you've been teaching for 6 hours a day and this is your 7th class and you're kind of a little checked out, I understand that. But it is a fine line to walk, as you say, about allowing exploration and to allow mistakes to work themselves out versus sitting in the corner, being on your phone and talking to clients and ignoring others. And that is the side that I am speaking to.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's not cool. And I think that, coaches, our job, if you're doing it right, you're going to feel pretty exhausted after, even a few clients, because in a good way, you might be energized, but also you're giving 100% of your presence to the people you're working with. Right. And that means like, you're there, you're with them, your phone's somewhere else, like unless you're using an app to teach or something. But yeah, I think that's a really big no. That's not good.
Yeah. So with all of that saying, I think, to wrap up our very first podcast is just to kind of recap what we think are let's say the two biggest missing things in music coaching that we see, that we've come across, and that what we hope teacher training, or particularly our teacher training that we provide, becomes a solution for.
Yeah. So in general, I think that one that I alluded to earlier was wordless teaching. Of course, that's a big part of the foundational program that we're launching shortly. I think, per your point, having a strength of understanding programming, which just means how to fill your time with your client based on their goals and their needs, and not having that hinge on your own preferences, right? Being adaptable to meet them where they're at, to bridge the gap between differences you might have between your own preferences and theirs. So, wordless teaching, I think programming these are very important ideas that we've kind of expanded on throughout this entire hour. There's others in our foundational teaching, like the first course that we're going to be launching, that are so important. So I would be remiss to say that those two are like the most important things, but I think in general, it's hard to know what you don't know until you start to explore. like what's out there. And I think our program, especially our introductory program, our introductory course with the foundational principles, which are along the lines of collaboration. You learn how to incite a collaborative experience both on a planning level and in the classroom itself, in the gym or wherever you're coaching. We have triaging as a part of our foundational course, which is how do you choose your battles wisely, right? Like focusing on one thing beautifully and doing that, until it's completed, then moving on, which again has all sorts of great repercussions, creating peace and creating enjoyment and creating fun in the learning process for both teacher and client. And then wordless teaching and programming, as we mentioned. So there's so many, and I think it's hard for me to answer that question. And it just makes it it makes the point at like teacher training is so important. Learning to be a good coach, being a master of what you do is so important. And, I hope that people will be able to take advantage of some of the things that we've spent years cultivating to get to this point, right?
Yeah. I ditto that all. It depends from teacher to teacher, depending on what they're missing most. But, to the higher level, as you mentioned, you don't know what you know until you expose yourself to it. And that desire to grow and put yourself in vulnerable situations, I believe, is one of those things that is missing most in a lot of music coaching, particularly for young coaches who are just coming out of undergrad or grad school and never either taken a formal education or had a ton of experience with a variety of different teachers, and then go in to try and teach a client and never think that there might be a better way or a more efficient way, a more engaging way to create, an engaging experience and to actually grow your studio in the right way.
Yeah. Out with the old and in with the modern.
Is that gonna be our new slogan now? Out with the old, in with the modern. Wink.
Modern coaches since 2020. Yeah, no, it's so true. I'm really excited to see who starts to engage with us and who we're going to be able to serve with the program that we're launching. So
yeah, I can't wait for people's questions. That's what I'm most excited about, for sure. Yeah, but congratulations, we did our first podcast. Woo-hoo! So for anyone who might watch this later, be sure to check us out on Instagram. We are moderncoach.co. You can, again, tune in back into this Facebook page where we stream live our podcast, hopefully once a week. And those will be posted as a schedule beforehand. And be sure to find some free content on Instagram and YouTube as we go ahead and repost our recorded podcast, as well as tutorials about tips and tricks to improve your lesson experience. So thank you so much for watching. We hope to see you all again. And again, this is Madison and Alyssa with Modern Coach.
Bye.
Bye.